got my cup of coffee, but you might want to put a pot on, grab your cup as we discuss some crazy late night prison conversations that involve some wild, crazy, imaginative stuff that I don't know if it's real or if it's over exaggerated. But when you sit in prison and you talk about all the stories from the streets, you shared all your exciting stories from the street, all the capers, all the ripping and running, all the ducking and dodging, police, other gang members, bullets, and whatever else you were ducking and dodging. Then the conversation starts going into some unusual topics. And that happens a lot in prison. And some of the topics that you hear are just so far-fetched that if I told them to you, you might not really believe some of the stuff that convicts and inmates talk about. So convicts and inmates have a way of, you know what I mean? So in prison, late at night, sometimes inmates, they find their ways to get their hands on narcotics, man. Believe it or not, they got dudes who are shooting up dope in prison. They shooting up heroin and everything else. But some of them, a lot of them mostly get their hands on marijuana. And they like to smoke that marijuana. And when they start smoking that marijuana, they start sharing some really wild and crazy stories. And one particular story that I remember that was just so insane and so far-fetched was this dude I was talking to. And I don't even know the old boy's name. So if I said his name, it would probably be the wrong name. But he was a dude, he was from out there in Bayou Town. And if you know anything about Louisiana, the bayous can lead into some deep, dark places that are full of secrets. And I'm not just talking about natural secrets. I'm talking about supernatural secrets. The supernatural secrets I'm talking about, it goes beyond the natural. Now, when you're in the natural, you're talking about the Yeti monster, right? You're talking about Bigfoot, and you're talking about the Rougarou. This is natural. These aren't supernatural beings, right? When you talk about, sometimes people say they seen extinct animals, such as dinosaurs. Some people claim to have seen velociraptors in real life. Now, who am I to say if somebody saw a velociraptor or not? Some people might have seen a velociraptor. People claim to see Bigfoot, and some people claim to see the Loch Ness Monster. So if you're in the swamps of Louisiana and you say that you saw the Rougarou, and I know people personally who said they saw the Rougarou, I'm telling you, I had people say, I remember growing up when I was a kid, and I used to go in the swamp a lot. I used to go fishing in the swamp. I would grab my fishing pole, and we going back in the early 80s. I would grab my fishing pole and I would head deep in the swamp. If you know anything about Lafitte, Louisiana, that's where the pirate Jean Lafitte was, right? So when I was a kid, I was fascinated with the fact that if I went in the woods fishing, that I might stumble upon Jean Lafitte's treasure. That was always, if you was a kid and you were from the bayou in Louisiana, you had dreams of being the one who would, I have places right now that I can go to, and there's trees that I still haven't dug underneath, that in my mind, I think Jean Lafitte's treasure is still buried in that spot. And I won't tell nobody, because in my mind, I remember doing science projects in school on Jean Lafitte and his hidden treasure. And I thought I knew where it was. I dug a few spots as a kid. That's what I was. I was an adventurous kid. So in the 1980s, I was digging holes all in the swamp. I was going underneath palmetto trees. I was moving rocks and everything around. I was going in bayous, and I was looking for Jean Lafitte's treasure. Well, I had a few people who tell me deep down in Lafitte, they seen the Rougarou. And if you know anything about the Rougarou, it's a swamp monster. And it resembles a human, kind of like, what I mean by human, it's a humanoid figure. Bigfoot's a humanoid figure. The Yeti man is a humanoid figure. And so is the Rougarou. So if you notice anything about these creatures, like I said, they're not supernatural, they're natural creatures. All right, Bigfoot is, you see him more up north. There's no sightings that I know of Bigfoot deep down in the swamps, in the bayou. Bigfoot would be further up north. You get toward Canada, Montana, maybe, those areas, that's where they see in Bigfoot. And of course, the Yeti monster, you're gonna see him in more of, colder. But in the South, in the swamps, it's the rougarou. And Bigfoot and the Yeti monster, their faces are like a man, like almost like an ape figure that's had fur and hair, kind of like a gorilla or a polar bear would, those type of hairs. But a rougarou doesn't have hair. A rougarou has scales, and a rougarou has slimy body anatomies, and he has long fingers, and his face is like an owl. Well, I know a dude, he said, and this was an older guy in the 80s, he's telling me the story. He said, this is what he says, the old Cajun dude, he said, "Say, youngster, when you go out there in them woods, I need you to be careful, yeah?" I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna be careful. What's out there?" He said, "Man," he said, "I know your dad done told you about that rougarou, huh?" I said, "Yeah, my dad did tell me about the rougarou." He said, "Son," he said, "I'm here to tell you it's real." I said, "The rougarou's real?" He said, "Listen, I know you go fishing back there." He said, "But when I seen that rougarou, it was the scariest thing I ever seen." He said, he said it was about to be dark. Sun was setting. He said, "I was about your age." And this dude now, you gotta think, this was in the 60s when he saw the rougarou. He said, "I was back there in them woods and I was about to make my way home." He said, "I had my trout line full of perch. I had caught perch all day long in brim, sakale. I had them, I was bringing them to the front. I'm gonna go clean them, man. We're gonna eat good that night." And he's walking up the bayou, and when he's walking up the bayou, he said he just heard this splash. And he said he kind of got startled, because it sounded like a heavy splash. And he said he looked, and he said, you can see, and if you know anything about the bayous in Louisiana, they're canals. We call them canals too. They're not long stretches. You could literally swim from one side to the next in about 5 minutes. And it's not long streams, so the water's kind of still. It's a swamp. So he says he looks, and he sees. He says, "I see what I think's a man." He said, "What that man doing in that water right there, yeah?" And I said, what was it? He said, "I thought it was a man, son." He said, "But when it's swimming," he said, "the further it got to the side that I was on, yeah." He said, it looked at me from the water, and his eyes was red." I said, "His eyes was red?" He said, "Them eyes were beaming and glowing. They were staring right at me, boy." I said, "They were staring at you?" He said, "They were looking right at me. They were piercing at me. I seen him, and I know he seen me." He said, "Look," I said, "What you did?" He said, "Son, let me tell you something. I dropped that dead trout line. I left all them perch and sakale right there." He said, "I even dropped my fishing pole." He said, "I ran so fast, I lost my shoes when I was running." He said, "It was like quicksand. I didn't miss a step. I walked right over it." He said, "It must have took me, it took me 35 minutes to walk back there to go fishing." He said, "I must have got to that front levee in about 5 minutes." I said, "You got to that front levee in 5 minutes?" He said, "I got to that front levee in 5 minutes." He said, "When I saw them red eyes staring at me," so I asked him, I said, did you see the rougarou get out of the water?" And he said, "No." He said, "When I saw them red eyes, I ain't stay around. I ain't stick around. I was to the front." So from that time on, as a young boy, when I went fishing in the swamps in Lafitte, Louisiana, you go look up Lafitte, Louisiana. It's deep down it's the end of the world almost, end of the country. I always considered that there was a possibility as a young boy that I would see the rougarou. So I grew up believing that there was a rougarou. There are people who believe there's Bigfoot and Yeti monsters. I believe that there are Bigfoots and Yeti monsters. Some people think that's crazy, but let me tell you something. When you're sitting in prison and you having a cup of coffee and you talking, and like I said, you done discussed everything that you could possibly think of when it comes to normal conversations. There's no more talking about the streets no more and hanging out with your friends at the club. That's boring. So people start getting into their deeper thoughts, right? And so I'm talking to this one guy, and I'm telling him the story about the guy who saw the rougarou. And he's telling me, keep in mind, just because it's prison, that doesn't mean there's not drugs. Like I told you, they were smoking weed in the dormitory. And so the guy, he was smoking the weed. And I didn't do a lot of it, you know what I mean? I say I never smoked weed, but I smoked some weed in prison. But I tried to stay away from it because I was trying to get my life in order. But a lot of dudes smoking. He's smoking the weed. I tell him the story about the guy who saw the rougarou. He said, "I heard there was a rougarou." He said, "But let me tell you what I saw." And he's from Homer. He's saying he's in the swamp and it's late at night and he's high. Keep in mind, I want you to keep in mind, this dude is high on narcotics. All right, so he admits that. He said, I'm on that PCP. He said, "I'm back there." And he said, "Man," he said, "I know a lot of people say it was because I was high that I didn't see what I see." He said, "But I saw a light shine out the sky." And this is in You'd have to go look. This see earlier I'm from around the Bayou in Lafitte. This dude was from Homer. So Homer's a little bit further in the opposite direction, going more toward the west. And it's swamp, but it's also swamp with open land. He said he saw light beam down from the sky. Check this out. You can laugh, you can say what you want. But my man said that he promises he saw a Cadillac come out the sky. Now, this ain't a Cadillac. I just found this to use as an example for illustration purposes. He said it came out the sky, it landed on the ground. He said he looked, right? The light disappears when the Cadillac lands on the ground. He said he looked, he swear they had 2 aliens in the car and they were smoking weed. Listen, I argued this dude down that he was hallucinating, but he told me that's what he saw, and he swears to it to this day. He said he swears on his mama that he saw a Cadillac. This was his argument, and this is what I'm telling you, conversation get crazy. He said that his thought was that the aliens came to Earth way back in the day, and this was an older model, 50-something Cadillac, in 1950-something or whatever. I don't know much about cars. And he says they took the car and brought it. They came from space. They took it. And he said, because back in Roswell and back in Area 51, there's proof that the aliens came, they were taking people. He said, but his theory is that aliens weren't just taking people, but they were taking technology. So he believed that they took a car, studied it on another planet, came back, studied that car, and implanted it. His theory was the alien car were actually lizard people. He said they were lizard people. And this is back when everybody's claiming that they got lizard people. Now, keep in mind, the movie They Live. That movie is that movie might be more true than we could think about. Because you got to think, back in the days, they had them. I don't know if anybody or y'all familiar with the television series V. Well, V was visitors from another planet. And those visitors from the other planet would come to Earth. And when they came to Earth, they were infiltrating Earth and taking over, and they were disguising themselves on Earth as aliens, as humans, right? Well, They Live, far as I can remember the date, I think it came out after V, because I remember growing up as a teenager watching V, The Visitors, but also They Live you know what? That's something I'm gonna have to look up into. I don't know if V came out before They Live or They Live came out before V, but the theory is similar, though they're different. Anyway, so his theory was that they were studying our technology, and they have been studying our technology since they've made contact with Earth, the aliens. And if you know anything about people, they see aliens, a lot of times they see aliens, and it's pretty much the same description. As I'm telling these, I know y'all picturing it. It's a skinny body with kind of the big facial features, the big head, which I believe holds a big brain, right? Because they're smart. I mean, obviously they're space traveling, and we're still not space traveling. So if there are aliens on other planets, their technology is obviously more advanced than our technology. And if their technology is more advanced than our technology, their science is more advanced than ours. That means they're studying not just our technology, but they were studying our anatomy. That's why they were taking people, and people were reported that they were taken, to be studied on, and they dissected some people, and some people they sent back. We don't know if they sent some people back as disguised aliens, lizard people, like my man said in the car. He saw aliens and he thought that was lizard people, which were aliens, and now they're disguised on Earth. So if you saw the movie They Live, the whole theory was that Roddy Piper, who played in the movie, he finds his box of sunglasses, he puts the sunglasses on, and there's these encrypted messages all over billboards. And when you turn the TV on or whatever, or open up a magazine, there's encrypted messages from the aliens. The aliens are actually, they're coming to Earth. They've already infiltrated Earth at this point, but now they're implementing their grand scheme. Their plan is to take over Earth, right? And so, listen, before They Live, if you go back to H.G. Wells, who wrote phenomenal science fiction stuff, the whole War of Worlds, even though it was based more like an alien, not describing it kind of like lizard people, but more like these Martians, the theory was the same. They needed the resources of Earth. So we don't know if those aliens needed the resources of this planet, right? The ones that still exist. And they're studying it because and we don't know. What if? I'm just saying, what if? Because people have reported that there are lizard people on the planet. And if there's lizard people on the planet, How do you know who's a lizard person and who ain't when people saying that they got lizard people? You know what I mean? I know the stuff sounds crazy, but it is crazy. And, you know, so this is the conversations that we're having in prison as we're sitting back having conversations in prison. We're talking about this type of stuff. And this type of stuff is, you know, it's just different, you know? And like I said, you know, in my thing, like you might get a cup of coffee because that's why I call it late night prison talk. Because when we was in prison, we'd be having a cup of coffee. I ain't got my cup of coffee, but hey, I got my Mountain Dew. They recently came back out with that Baja Blast. You got to be careful. How we know the aliens didn't make Mountain Dew? Aliens might have made Mountain Dew. Look, it gives us kidney stones, right? Aliens might have put something in the Mountain Dew so we could have kidney stones. I don't know, maybe the lizard people, they can withstand the ingredients that's on the back of this Mountain Dew. I don't know. So we sitting in prison and we having this discussion, and he really believes that he saw what we call lizard people. Now, if I'm being honest, when I'm talking to this dude, I don't believe him, right? I think he was seeing things because he was high on drugs. But the guy that I talked to who went fishing in the bayou when I was a kid, I think he really saw the rougarou. I think he witnessed the rougarou. He saw the rougarou. And I think the rougarou is wandering in the swamps of Louisiana. If you have been keeping up with it, there's a species of wolf in Louisiana right now that they recently have discovered has made a big comeback. This is a wolf. This is a certain wolf species that's mixed with coyote. This is just recent. They've discovered a large population, and the population of wolf that they discovered that's mixed with coyote is in the Houma area, going down toward that bayou area I was just telling you, where he said he saw this aliens land, you know, in the Cadillac. So there's some stuff that's going on. Obviously, the wolves and the coyotes were mixing, and that is a subspecies of wolf-coyote mix that's just here in Louisiana. And now they're being studied by scientists and by students in different universities. They're trying to obviously put them on a Protective Species Act so they can, help their habitat and help thrive. And, there's no more wolves in Louisiana. But this discovery, even though it's not a full wolf, it's a wolf-coyote mix, it's a hybrid. So there are all kind of hybrids. What I'm saying is this stuff starts getting, eerily, if there's wolf coyote hybrids, and wolves and coyotes, as far as I know, are on the canine species, right? How do we know that alien human hybrids don't exist? We know that supernaturally, see, now we're getting from natural to supernatural, because if I think aliens, if it's really aliens that we say they are, these aliens are natural beings. I don't think they're supernatural. Supernatural would be an angel or a demon. I think an alien is a natural being. So if aliens found a way to modify our DNA and genetically modify us and then genetically modify themselves to blend in with us to try to take the resources from Earth, then this would be something that we wouldn't know, because now, just like on They Live and V the Visitors, they're blending in and we don't have the technology to decipher who they are. And then we don't know if our world leaders, the powers that be, are in conjunction with these alien species. We don't know that. I'm saying there's a lot that we don't know. If you say you know everything, then we can't know everything. So, you know what I mean? It's a possibility. Now I'm going back because we know that there's hybrids, right? Historically speaking, if you just look at the Bible, remember David and Goliath. David fought a giant. And when the scouts in the Old Testament went out into the wilderness, the Israelites, to find a land that they was going to conquer, that they was going to be the promised land, they ran into, the scouts came back and they told them, they said, hey, look, we see, we're like grasshoppers to these giants. I don't think, figuratively speaking, they were talking like, I think these were real giants. I'm talking giants that, I'm talking 20-foot tall giants, right? And so we don't know how tall Goliath was that David fought. We know that David, the Bible says that the Spirit of the Lord was upon on him. So God was with him. He put that slingshot, boom, he hit that giant in the middle of his head, Goliath, and Goliath died. But this was a real giant. This was a literal giant. It wasn't a metaphor. So how did that giant get to the earth? There was giant species of man. I don't think he was fully man. I think that Goliath, the Bible says, the fallen angels, right, the watchers, they came down from heaven because they were cast down, and that the angels had relations with the daughters of men being humans. And so they took women as their, and they had children with the women. And that's how you get the Nephilim or the giants. And so now we go from talking about natural beings, right? Like Bigfoot, Yeti, Rougarou, natural, right? I don't think they're supernatural. And then you go into supernatural, angels, demons, right? And now you have a supernatural and a natural hybrid, a Nephilim. And so they have these Nephilims upon the earth. So you got to think that these Nephilim, these natural, supernatural beings, have the capacity of man and the capacity of angels. And so their technology and their knowledge would have vastly been superior to any man that was on earth at that time. And I think even now, if they still exist. A lot of people think that most of the Nephilim or most of the giants that were part of the fallen angels who had relationships with the daughters of men are now gone. They're extinct, no more exist. I don't know. They say a lot of them died in the flood. As we know, when David fought Goliath, the flood from Noah's time had already happened. That already occurred. So we still see giants later. And so could there still be giants on the earth? I don't personally think there's still giants on earth, but I think that there's remnants of supernatural, natural beings that are still upon the earth. People say that they see spirits all the time. People see supernatural things all the time. And so, like I said, can it be far-fetched that an alien ship takes something like a car or a vehicle from Earth? It sounds crazy. It sounds far-fetched. But let's say we were conquering a distant planet as man, humans. Wouldn't we go there to get specimens of everything that we could? When we go to Mars, we send rover vehicles and we get rocks, we get sand, we get whatever we can, study it, we bring it back. That's all they have there. But imagine if we went to a planet, right? Imagine if Mars, for instance, had real living specimens. That we would have them on Earth and we'd be studying by now. And imagine if they had an advanced species on another planet and we were able to outmatch them in our wits and our technology, then we would take what they had too to study it. Because the whole purpose is dominating and conquering so the species can have a place to thrive and last in, right? Maybe we welcome our home here on Earth. This is some crazy stuff to think about, I know. But that's why I call this series Late Night Prison Talk. Because when it's late at night and you sitting in prison and you having these crazy conversations, this is the type of stuff that comes up. And one other thing I wanted to cover tonight was Y2K. Go back to Y2K if you remember. I was in prison during Y2K. And all over the news, and it did not matter the news source, it was all over the news. There was going to be a crash in our technology. Our computer systems were going to crash. We weren't prepared for the rollover from 1999 going into 2000. And so everybody thought that once the computer systems crashed, then everything else would crash. And obviously, lose our satellite connections. We would lose our connections for TV, which I think the power grids, all that controls the hospitals. It controls pacemakers. It controls all kind of things that we use as machines to keep people going and alive in hospitals. The police department relies on it. The air traffic control relies on it. Every day on the streets and the highways rely on it. So if the computer systems would have crashed, obviously it would have been chaos. We would have went back into the dark ages. And so a lot of people thought that was happening. A lot of people began hoarding, right? Some people began supplying food. Some people got precious metals, silver and gold. And some people You know, everybody had their own things. Some people were going to the mountains. They were preparing for this. I'm telling you, there were people who were preparing for the worst case scenario during Y2K when it flipped in from 1999 going into 2000. I'm sitting in prison. So I think, what do I got to do to prepare for it? Because at this time, I still had 6 years to do before I was even going to get out. And so I'm sitting in prison. And so I started getting this great idea. I talked to some of the people who was in the dorm with me, and I started telling people in the other dorm, look, y'all start stocking up on water. So we started taking tumblers, these little plastic tumblers, is about 12 inches tall. And we started filling them up, putting them all along the wall and underneath the beds. And we had tumblers filled up. And then we also were figuring out what we can use to break the glass and the doors to get out just in case the prison system locked us in. We were thinking, listen, it was crazy, but we were coming up as prisoners and convicts. We were thinking about all case scenarios because you got to think the news and everybody else, even officers, were predicting a possibility of a global economic crash that was going to send the world into the dark ages. So we're sitting in prison and we don't know what to do. We're helpless. We're going to be stuck in the dorm at midnight when the clock shifts over from 11:59 to midnight, 1999 to 2001. And we wasn't sitting back listening to a Prince song talking about 1999, party like it's 1999. No, we were worried. We were looking at those vents, wondering if as soon as the clock hit midnight or 12:01, they was going to send gas through the vents to do away with us so we wouldn't be a threat to society because we were disposable, right? They didn't want to let the prisoners out. We would cause more havoc, more chaos to a world that would probably be experiencing mass chaos and hysteria. So we're sitting in there and we're hoarding water and we're buying tuna fish off the store, the canteen sheet, and we're buying Vienna sausages. We got loaves of bread. Everybody's hoarding up. Everybody's getting ready. And I'm the one who started this thing because I was listening. I'm like, yo, we got to do something. And so the whole jail I was in and the officers like, man, you're crazy. You know what I mean? We're like, man, we got to be prepared, And because they saw all the food, we told them, but just in case, there's a food shortage. And they're like, they couldn't stop me because you can order canteen. You can order as much canteen as you want. So we had canteen everywhere. And, but they didn't know we also had weapons. I personally made some brass knuckles out of tuna fish cans. I took the tuna fish cans and I sharpened the edge even more than they were. I folded them into where they're flat like that, and I put a strap around them so I can have them both hand tuna fish things in case things got crazy. Hey, picture The Walking Dead. This is way before that, but what retrospect, I'm thinking like, what if the world turns like The Walking Dead, right? But The Walking Dead didn't exist then, but I'm thinking like, we got to be ready. So I got these weapons. You got to think, Rick got his, Michonne had her blades, and everybody got their own weapons. Daryl got his crossbow. Well, I had my tuna fish can knuckles. I was going to be jabbing some zombies in the head. You know what I mean? So here I am. I got these tuna fish can brass knuckles, and other people got shanks. This is prison. That's a whole nother thing. Y'all know how prison goes. So we're prepared for Y2K. And we're sitting there discussing. They're like, man, you really think they're going to send that gas through the vents, bro? I'm like, man, I guess if they send gas through the vents, they could just do us in. But then now other dudes are starting to get their conspiracies too. They sipping that coffee. Let me get sipping my Mountain Dew. And so they sipping their coffee. And guys are like, well, what if they send that gas in here that's going to unalive us? What if they send that gas in here that's going to turn us into zombies? And I'm like, dang. You might be right. Maybe they want to use us as specimens, psychological and physical specimens that they can test mentally and physically, right? See if they can mind control us as zombies to turn us into some kind of secret army or secret army machine and send us out into the world to do the bidding. It's just the stuff that's going on in prison. I'm telling you, man, when prisoners if you sat in prison with nothing but time on your hand, you would be talking about this stuff too. Look, they got people who talk about this stuff, never been to prison. And some of the stuff isn't far-fetched. There's conspiracy theories everywhere, but not every conspiracy theory is something that's cow jumped over the moon. Some of the stuff, we just need to be able to decipher the difference. Some conspiracy theories take some conspiracy theories and implement them into reality, where we can see what's real and what's not real, right? So that was the story of Y2K, and that's what happened with Y2K when I was in prison. Anyway, y'all know what happened. 11:59 turned into 1200 12001, and nothing happened. Everything just remained the same, and Y2K never did occur, and the world stayed the same. And here we are today. But that was the stories that I wanted to share tonight. And I wanted to jump into late night prison talks. We're going to start doing late night prison talks on the Pen and the Shank. And if you're not subscribed to the Pen and the Shank, take a moment to like and subscribe. Please like the video. I'm a smaller YouTube channel, and I do crime and prison related content. And I do it in an unusual and unique way. My motto for the Pen and the Shank is the Pen and the Shank is the most unusual and unique crime and prison channel experience on YouTube. I stick to that because I'm talking about stuff that other prison related channels are not covering, are not talking about. You can go back and look at my vast library of videos. I cover a lot of different things. And if you're not liked and subscribed to the Pen and the Shank, please like and subscribe and consider joining this growing community and help this smaller YouTube channel to get some traction. We have a lot of good stuff, and we're going to start covering late night prison talk, where we talk about everything from aliens, Y2K, gases being sent inside jails. We're going to talk about all that different type of stuff. But that's what we got tonight. And I just appreciate everybody who tuned in and was able to watch, the first live late night prison talks. And that's going to be what we call it on the Pen and the Shank, late night prison talks. It's something that I made a video about probably about a year ago when I was first trying to figure this YouTube thing out and get my traction going, but it's gotten much better since then. But thanks, and thanks for watching. Give me a like and subscribe. Let's get it.